is the hardest season of parenting for you? Because for me, the answer is yes. And I say that as somebody who has children in all seasons of parenting. And I was really evaluating why certain seasons are hard. And I think that it is because 0 to 6 is really hard because you feel very unseen, like you're almost hidden from the world because everything is inconvenient. Like no matter what you want to do, it's inconvenient because you're going to be taking along with you like a child who is still basically living in a lucid dream. Like they're just going to do really out of pocket things. It's like trying to take like a drunk best friend on a walk, and you're like, I don't want to take a drunk best friend to a grocery store. That sounds terrible. But when you do, people are like, oh my goodness, that child is acting like a crazy person. You're like, yes, because I took a tiny drunk like human to a grocery store. This is not where they want to be. You know where they want to be? Not here, along with me. So it's really hard during those times. But then you move on to the next years, which is 7 to 12. Which they are, you're like kind of missing the baby years where you're like, oh, they're not like this tiny thing, but you just went wall slam into the literal years where just everything is so incredibly literal, and the personality change, it's basically like you got handed a different kid. This child thinks completely different than they've ever thought before. And that makes sense from like a development standpoint, because 0 to 6, they're really just learning about them, that they exist. And then 7 to 12, they're learning about the world around them, which means now they're going to say totally out of pocket stuff. They're going to comment on people's physical appearances. And you're like, we don't do that, but they don't know that yet. This is how they're learning those things. So it seems rude, but in reality, they're just learning, which makes it hard because you don't know what they're going to say next. And so you're constantly navigating this. And then once you really get good at this, you move into the next hard, which is the teen years, which is 13 to 18, which is like basically just like, think of it like going to the gym. Like the first time you go into the gym, it's really hard, but like the more you go into the gym, you start to learn more machines, you start to carry more weight, and you start to be able to navigate everything that's in there. Basically, you're their personal trainer. And so as your years as their personal trainer move on, it's hard because now you realize you're getting to the end of the road and they can go to the gym by themselves now. So like in those years, it's basically integrating everything they've learned for those first 12 years. They're now learning everything about themselves while also learning around the world around them. Now you merge those two things in the teen years, so they're learning about how they themselves fit into the world, and that is tricky because they're doing that a lot with peers. And I think everyone should read Gabor Mate's books on when it talks about peer influence, because it's really good, and I wish I had read it, I don't know, forever ago. But it's really critical in that time to make sure that you're still standing in that like personal trainer place, and that you're not just moving on to like a coach where they're proficient. And that's really like the 19 and up. You're just their coach at that point, and you're there to be able to coach them along the way if you need it, which is also hard because you're like, I know what you could do, but I'm not going to tell you unless you ask me because I don't want to be invasive. So I'm just here for support, knowing what maybe you might want to do, but you might not. You actually might know better, but I'm not ready to cope with that yet because that means I'm not needed, which is another version of hard. So parenting is just hard. That's why people talk about parenting being hard. It's not that it is hard and unworthy of like the call. It's hard because it pushes us to the limits of ourselves. And that is what's hard, because we are expanding ourselves and we don't always like to do that. And so that is hard, and for all different reasons, which is why we need to rally around each other and be a tribe. Anyway, those were my random thoughts before I go on a walk.